I'm going to call the Municipal Building Commission meeting of July 2nd to order at 5:30. And the first order of business is we have minutes from June 5th. Jackie,
Move to approve. Second.
any discussion? All those in,
I have some discussion. I wasn't there, you had me down as being there at those two meetings.
Okay, I'll make that
I was away on
correction.
vacation.
okay. So you were, so the same applies to the June 10th meeting as well?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, so with the exception of Jerry's not being there, any other discussion? Then the motion is on the floor to approve with that friendly amendment. All those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. And Jackie, June 10th,
Move to approve. Second.
with the friendly amendment that Jerry wasn't there?
Yes.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. I'm gonna skip these bills for the minute because they all relate to the next two speakers. Tom, you're up.
Good evening. I believe we have change order 5 for you tonight.
Okay, so first of all, this is for the sludge landfill garage.
Garage, correct.
And is this gonna be the final wrap-up of this?
We should have one more pay application. It's in draft right now. It's gonna be the closeout for Collins to release their retainage.
Okay,
And that will be the final application coming your way. That should be within the next month, by the end of July.
okay. We'll let you know what the date is when we
Yeah.
establish that. So you have a change order?
Correct. Change order 5 basically summarizes all of the liquidated damages we applied over the contract. The back charge for repetitive shop review. And we also directly paid the file sub bids. We started getting letters from the file sub bids looking for payment. They weren't being paid by the contractor, so we took over that portion and we paid them directly. We withheld that from the retainage to pay what they were owed. And it's also, Collins did sign off and waived mediation. They can't go back to mediate anything for liquidated damages, so we did give them a break, and there was $4,283.37 that they owed us in liquidated damages, and we agreed to waive that charge if they would sign off a mediation to put this to rest, and they did. So that's what's in this change order, and it's gonna reduce the overall contract, when all said and done, by $192,011.25. That's the combination of the liquidated damages, what we made direct payment on, the repetitive review money we got back, plus the money we're gonna waive for their outstanding liquidated damage debt.
So you have settled the case?
We have settled the case, they have signed off on it, everything is
And the
done.
city solicitor has approved?
Yes, city mayor signed off on it, he made the offer, yes.
Okay. So therefore, this is a deduct change?
This is a
order?
deduct change order, yes, of over $192,000 off their contract price. This allows us to reduce the contract price, that frees up that money to the city for this project to move ahead with the next phase by this change order.
Okay, so some of it we will have paid to CDM Smith.
We did pay to CDM, correct, yeah.
But the rest just goes back into
The rest goes back into that fund.
into
and
the
once this-
wastewater?
It'll actually go back into this fund, this 3219 fund. And then once we do the final closeout with Collins and we get the final pay application, then we can take that money and it can be moved into the next phase of the fund, which is the sludge landfill capping.
Okay. And do we have, is it premature, or do we have buy-in from their bonding company?
Yes, the solicitor did check on the bonding company. There was no issue with bonding with this. She did check, like you asked. I had Cindy check.
Okay.
That wasn't a problem.
All right. Any questions on the commission? Then Jackie,
Move to approve. Second.
any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and then Tom, while you're there,
Yep.
on our list of bills, we directly paid R.J. Forbes 3590.55, Thomas Snowden, 7,300 even. Landfill garage, what is it, Senadella Masonry?
Correct.
2692.87, and Metropolitan Corp., $7,007.20. And those are all the direct payments you're
Those are all the
referring
direct to
to.
file subbids, correct.
And those are all subtracted from.
Those are all part of this change order, number 5, yes, those are all reduced off the contract price because we made the payments directly.
Okay, then I will ask the commission to confirm the payment of those bills, which I signed so that they would be timely
So
paid.
moved. Second.
Any discussion? All is in favor?
Aye.
Okay. That's all you have for us?
That's all I have for you.
Before you go,
Yes,
Gail, what's our schedule?
Our schedule for the next meeting?
Yeah, we don't have one scheduled?
We
or
don't
do
have one
We have
scheduled.
one scheduled for, well, we have an SBC meeting on August 14th, so are we gonna have an MBC meeting on August 7th? Does that work for everybody? So that's your goal, is to get this
yeah, I mean,
closed out by
we're
then?
waiting for 2 more small items on the punch list, and we're gonna close out. We actually have pay application 16 in draft, we're just waiting for them to do the punch list items, and then it's gonna be quick. Hopefully it
Okay.
passes.
So August 7th will be our next meeting.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for
Thank you.
coming.
Thanks, Tom.
Luther Phase 2, Courtney.
Hi. I'm actually just here tonight to finally close out Luther Phase 2. The last time we talked about Luther Phase 2, the only thing that we had outstanding was we were holding $3,000 just to wait for grass to establish on the dike across the reservoir from the station. And there was just a small amount of paint that was needed down in the vault for the crest gate side plate. Methuen came in, the grass is established, the coating is done, and everything looks good.
Okay, so we've already taken all the votes we need to take, is that correct?
I'm sorry?
No, there's no further vote required, there's no final requisition,
There's just a final invoice.
excuse me?
The final invoice for $3,000.
Oh, okay.
Stay on the list.
I see, that's on second thing on our agenda then, is the payment to Methuen for $3,000.
Yes.
Okay, so is there,
So moved. Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, then that takes care of that. So nothing further on that project?
Nope.
Okay, and while you're there, I see on our agenda CDM Smith for the Attleboro Pawtucket interconnection.
Yes.
Where does that project stand?
That project stands, we're still working with the abutting property owners on placement of the station. So it's moving along, we're not
Determined, in
there
fact-
yet.
Have we determined, in fact, has someone done a title and figured out who the actual owner is?
We have.
And is it who we thought it was?
No, it's actually not. It's who we were originally talking to was the owner to the southwest, and it's actually the owner to the southeast and across the street that actually owns the traffic triangle in question.
And so was the owner to the southwest the one who was concerned about the truck access?
Yes, actually, they both are, and we've been in contact with them both. They're both willing to work with the city, but we don't have anything final figured out yet.
So are we intending to do an eminent domain taking, or are we intending to have a deed to the city, or what's our procedure?
I don't think we're gonna have to do an eminent domain. It sounds like it's possibly still going to be deeded to the city, but we're not there yet. We're in contact with the other property owner, but we haven't met with them yet. We're looking to meet in mid-July.
Okay. What does this mean in terms of the bidding on this job?
Well, the bidding was supposed to be this spring, so it's gonna end up pushed probably fall or winter, so it would be construction next spring. So we're delayed out for the construction. And we're not 100% sure yet. Everything is still ready to bid, like, once we're done with the property placement.
Okay. And so the 2297.32 for CDM Smith, that's appropriate to pay?
Yes.
Move to approve. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right. And I guess we'll wait to hear from you when you have something further on Attleboro, Pawtucket.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Gordon.
Okay. I think most of the audience is here for the library project. Joel, wanna come up to the podium? So I guess there's a number of things that we need to talk about. One is that I have an invoice from you for $17,000 to, I think, pay for the work that you and Alex Allen did. And then I think a second thing is that we understand that we still have about $28,000 left, Gail, in the till. So we want to find out from you how you would recommend we best use that money to get to a project that we can get approved. And I think the third thing is, we share with you Councilor Cobus's email. And I think the last thing and most important thing is to talk about what was presented by Alex and where we think we should go from that presentation. So maybe perhaps the best thing to do is start with the counselor's email. Maybe we could go over that.
Okay.
So his first bullet point was, why does the community need a library? Books are dead. Well, everyone has internet. What value does the library provide to the community? Why not shut it down? What data backs up this hypothesis? What has happened in other communities? And I think I want to be clear that in his email he said he wasn't advocating us not having a library, but he wondered, that was the first things in his bullet point. Do you have any information you can share with us with regard to those questions?
I think that the library is not just about books, it's about research, it's providing a place for community to come together, and a good part of the library is providing internet access to other sources of data that are not just books. I don't think that many communities would concur that books are dead, particularly if you look at the children's section, and children don't learn how to read by going on the internet and learning on the computer how to read. They learn a lot about reading by different books that are geared to different ages, and I think that continues on through the age. That I think that there are other supplements to books, but I don't know that folks have agreed across the country that books are dead and the internet is the only source. Perhaps the librarian or others would want to speak to this, but I think that what we find is that there's the libraries that are really exciting are serving a lot more functions as well, and we just finished one up the road in Randolph, a renovation, and it is about books, but it's also about students coming there after school and kids in the middle school coming there, and the library is serving a lot more services than it did in the past by virtue of both parents are working or they're single parents, and so the library is taking on roles that are going beyond books and data. They're providing safe spaces, they're providing community spaces, they're providing spaces of learning, places of meeting, and I think that you just have to go look across the country and across the world, and you see that England is building brand-new libraries, other countries are building brand-new libraries. That this concept that we don't need a library, I don't think I think is more of a rhetorical question that he had than an absolute question.
Yeah, and it also strikes me that the last time I looked, the state list of library projects waiting to be funded had some 18 or 19 projects on it. If the state was, if we were closing down libraries, I doubt the state would be devoting money to building new ones. Although sometimes the state is in error. But, okay, so more importantly, the second bullet says, what is the basis behind finding that the square footage of the building we have is appropriate for a community our size?
Can I
Sure.
just stress the first bullet point? I thought it was really well articulated, the need for a library and the services. I thought that part of the presentation was very well thought out and presented. So I'm confused by that statement. I guess rhetorical would be a good point. It was mentioned that collections are maybe less relevant than open spaces, and the needs of libraries have changed. And again, I thought that part of the presentation was very well articulated. So just to add my 2 cents on that question in support of what is being said. On the second bulletin, come back to me on.
Okay,
Thank
so we'll
you.
get to that one in a moment, because I think you're absolutely right that, and one of the things that I have noticed over my years in Attleboro is that there's a real lack of appropriate meeting spaces in the city for anywhere from groups of 4 to 6 people to groups this size to, I don't know how many people showed up last night for the meeting that Councilor Waterman had put out, but,
42 people.
excuse me?
42 people showed up.
Yes, and so for 42 people to show up for a meeting about traffic in the area, if I understood it right, it was the traffic coming off exit 3, no?
Yes.
Yes, yeah, it was.
Shaking his head back.
Can I talk?
Sure.
There were apparently 2 meetings. That's why the confusion. There was a meeting on Holden Street attended by at least 25 to 30 of the residents about Holden Street's traffic.
Yeah.
Other issues on that street. So, 2 issues.
And the other one was about the exit 3 traffic?
Correct.
Yeah. So, those kinds of meeting spaces and having them available, I think, is an important function that the building can serve when it isn't necessarily serving the other needs that you described. And having multi-purpose for a building is always a good thing. So, how do we know that our 37,000 square feet, if I remember the number right, is the right size for Attleboro, Joel?
Right, so I don't like to rely on rules of thumb, but for Massachusetts, the average square foot per person for a library is between 1 and 2 square feet per capita. So I think that's one benchmark that lines up.
That would put us underneath then, 43,000 people.
Well, we said 1 to 2 square feet.
1 to 2 square foot per person.
43,000
So
people.
it-
He's saying that we're gonna be underneath that.
We're underneath that at 37.
If you went with the 1 square foot.
If you went, yeah, that's gonna be 0.9 something square feet. I can't do the math that well. But, do you, so, well, go ahead, keep going.
I'm not sure how you're getting under, if you take the population,
Of 43,000 and 1 square foot, that would get us to 43,000 square feet
43,
needed in
yeah.
a library. If it was 2, it would be 86,000 square feet needed in a library. We're at around
we're
37,
under,
aren't we?
yeah. Right. I thought you were saying it the other way around. Okay.
No, our library is undersized by that rule of thumb, correct?
That's Correct, yeah. I think what Alex was saying in the analysis is that you can make that library work because, for two reasons. A, he is downsizing the collections area somewhat. But two, the building would be dramatically more efficient if the upper floor where the administrative spaces were was consolidated below, and that whole upper floor is made into new space. That would generate you basically another 25% of library-type space that he feels in the report can be made more efficient through consolidating the administrative spaces below. And that upper level gives you two opportunities. One is for meeting space, or one is to put the children's library up there and dramatically increase the options for either one of those. I think that he in the report, they also went through and compared your library to other libraries as a benchmark, and there are two plans. I think the real answer to this question is sort of the answer to your first question, is what would you do with the funds that are available? I think you would prove this second question from the counselor by taking the schematic concepts that the library consultants generated and then taking your real life set of plans. So we have computer drawn, accurate plans of the whole building, and if you test his hypothesis with the actual building, I think that would be the good next step, and that would further corroborate the statement that Alex feels that the library is sufficient size to meet the needs. So there'd be another step in that corroboration.
One thing that struck me about the presentation was I think the fourth floor is something over 7,000 square feet.
That's correct.
And I think it would be safe to say it's underutilized.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are some offices up there and some meeting room up there, but it's really not publicly available space.
Mhm.
So one of the things that struck me was that if we really are effectively operating in 30,000 square feet, if we made the fourth floor usable, we are now increasing the size of the library by 7,000 square feet without actually increasing the size of the library.
Thank you. It takes an attorney to explain what I was trying to explain. That's exactly what I was saying. You increase the efficiency of the building by having that fourth floor made available through consolidation.
So with a small expenditure, we can capture more square footage.
Correct. One thing that I thought was also very helpful when you think about it, and it changes the library a little bit, but filling in the atrium hole on the main level of the old library, I think would have a dramatic impact on the usability of that, what is the entry level of the old library, the second floor of the new library. So I think that will also, it doesn't add that much square footage, but it eliminates a tremendous amount of circulation that's going around that opening in the floor. And I think that was one of the more telling opportunities, I thought, of the report.
Okay. Questions from?
I do. When we commissioned this study, part of it was supposed to be a cost analysis of what the building was worth and everything. And I didn't see anything in the report in regards to that. I took it upon myself to talk to the city appraiser, Stan, about 2 weeks ago. And he said that the city has a value of that on that building of $1,767,000. I think it's absolutely ludicrous to spend $12 or $13 million on a building that's not even worth $2 million.
Well, I understand your point, but I think the question that I think you're getting at is it appropriate to spend this kind of money on this building as opposed to looking for another location. And I think that's pretty much what you're
You know, I
getting
think
at.
if I remember correctly, I heard the number of 17 million mentioned for a new one. If you took the 17 million, if the city sold that building and they got $1.75 million for it, or 2 million, whatever it was, knocked out of the 17 million, now you down to 15 million for a brand new building that was designed and purposed solely for what the intended purpose was, as a library, as opposed to taking that building and trying to retrofit it and do the best you can with what's there as far as square footage in the building and that.
You want to comment on that?
I think that was sort of the purpose of the study. Was when we did the first study was to look at the exterior waterproofing of the building, so the wall, the windows, the roof, the air conditioning, the cooling system, the heating system, your infrastructure costs that were independent of the library. And that cost was found to be relatively high. So the second step of the study was a little bit of a detour taken to say, well, if I'm going to spend that much money to restore the building, what needs to happen inside to make the building into a reasonable library, a good library? And then is it worth it, or is it more cost effective to do that than an alternative? Now, what that alternative wasn't part of our study. Our study was just to benchmark. You have the existing renovations, what does it cost to, what's involved in doing the internal renovations, and is that a cost effective?
Well, it may not have been put out to you that way, but when we had our discussion, that was part of our discussion as a group of whether it was worth spending that kind of money on the building. That was one of the reasons why we asked for the study.
Yeah, well, I think that's what I'm.
And I think that's one of the key questions that we as a group haven't decided yet. We've just listened to the report. But Jerry, just a couple of thoughts I had. One is that my car is a 2007 and might be worth $1,500, I don't know. It's got 145,000 miles on it, but it's worth way more to me than it is to anyone who would pay fair market value.
Right, I understand that, and if it was a couple $1 million, I would agree with that, but I mean, they're looking at spending 6 times what the building is worth.
You can't look at just what, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Be recognized. You can't look at just the value of the building either, Jerry. The value that the library has to the community has value. The services it provides, the things that it does, the location it is serving the need of those who need to access the library. There's non-monetary value that we have to
Oh, I
take
understand that,
into
but I mean, we're
consideration as
talking
well.
6 times the value of the building, or maybe
No,
more.
you're stuck on the value of the building, I get it. But there's other value to that building that's not monetary.
And one of the things to remember is that if we need to spend $8 million just to rehab that building, and it's all on our nickel, then that's one way of looking at it. But if, as I understand it, if we spend twice as much and qualify to get $8 million from the state and still spend the same $8 million ourselves, because we've now turned it from a repair project into a renovation project. The cost to the city is the same, but the valuable building we get out of it seems to me to be much greater.
That's correct.
Can we just go back to the first question too, Joel? And I'm sorry, I had notes earlier that I forgot to ask this. You were using a rule of thumb, and you said it's always dangerous using a rule of thumb on space required per capita. According to the American Planning Association, they have the square foot required per capita for our population as low as 0.6. Do you think that'd be a reasonable number as well? I mean, again, it's a rule of thumb, it's
There
an
are
average.
rules of thumb, and as you go across the country, like New Jersey is 0.7. So there are ranges. Massachusetts tends to be on the higher side,
higher
but
side.
your number's not.
Completely
No.
off base, right? So
No.
even at 0.6, even if we went up to 0.8, my point being that at 37,000 square feet, we're more than adequate to serve our community, it appears.
I think that was the conclusion.
That was the conclusion, yeah.
That was the main topic of the report, and that's what they
Yeah.
concluded.
I gotcha.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
But then going back to Jerry's point, we did not include as part of this, looking at other sites, what it would cost to
Right.
build.
The land.
But one of the things that I think Alex emphasized was the fact that this is sort of an anchor at one end of the downtown. And it is a very well-located building to serve that purpose. I think that was one of his conclusions, is that correct?
Yes.
And I think that what a developer would pay to turn this building into housing, which would be probably, in my mind, what Stan would have looked at it as, is not necessarily, to me, its value to our community. And I don't know how other people on the commission feel about that, but you know, we haven't heard, do you have anything, Jackie, Terry, or Ed?
That made my point.
Just agreeing with what Eddie said before about there's a lot more to the library than just the physical structure of the building. I think if we just look at the cost of any one of the buildings that we have in the downtown or in the city, the actual physical structure probably is assessed at a lot lower value than what it's really worth. I know my house is assessed at one price, but my house is worth a lot more than that. And I think it's the same thing with the library. I don't think $7 million that we'd be putting into a repair is that big of a deal in the long run, considering.
Any other thoughts, Jerry, or?
I'm gonna have a hard time swallowing this.
Well, we haven't swallowed anything yet.
You know,
We're seeking
I understand
opinions.
it's worth more than what the monetary value of the building is because of the location and everything. But I mean, sometimes you gotta take the love away from it and look at it from a dollars and cents point of thing. Now, you mentioned your car. I mean, you wouldn't go out and spend, you said, what did your car, you said your car was worth $2,000?
I never
say it was
looked.
2,000. If it's worth
2007 with 145,000 miles on
You
it.
wouldn't turn
so-
around and spend $12,000 to fix your car up, would you?
No.
I rest my case. At some point, you have to take the emotions away from it and look at it from a practical standpoint.
Yeah. No,
I think we should do both sides. Look at both sides, look at
We are.
Look at
the
everything.
cost of buying the land. Where would you find the land that was,
Well, one of the things that everybody has had 1,000 uses for is over at Highland.
oh yeah.
One of the things which leads us into one of the other bullet points is that, do we know how Alex came up with his cost estimates?
Yeah, I was going to jump in on that. What he used is rules of thumb from historic data from Board of Library Commissioners, and those are relatively accurate. And at this level of study, that's an appropriate benchmark to use. What I was going to suggest is that, just like we were saying, take the concept and put it into a real set of drawings for the library. If you do that, then the same estimator that did the mechanical and the building envelope cost estimate could do the interior cost estimate. We could bring the two cost estimates together and give you a consolidated estimate for the entire building, and then you could do the math and calculations with the library commissioners as well. So you would go from a benchmark cost to a estimated cost, which would be much better.
Yeah, you know, if we were to build a 40,000 square foot building somewhere, the high school's over $500 a square foot.
Yep.
And so I wondered about Alex's numbers, and maybe high schools and libraries cost different amounts.
I think it's a good comparison. A library is running $500 to $600 a square foot minimum.
So building a new library would be, if it was $600 a square foot for 40,000 square feet,
Like a $20 to $24 million project,
right?
minus land acquisition or.
Right.
Which, to me, when I think about that, I say, okay, if the state's gonna pay for half of that, we've now increased the cost to the city from 8 million to 10 million or 12 million. So I think we need to be mindful of that as well, Jerry.
But again, you're looking at 40,000 square feet where we determined that 30 to 35,000 square feet efficiently built maybe.
But even 35,000 square feet,
That's
it's
five.
at $600, $550, we're still talking.
18 to 20 million.
Remodeling costs are always gonna be higher than new construction.
Well, that's one of the interesting things, and I think I want to get Joel's opinion on that, because we built a brand-new building behind the 1907 building in 1992. And so that building still should have a lot of useful life left, should it not?
The building does. I think the mechanical systems have reached their limits.
The mechanical systems were obsolete the day they were installed, we understand that. A former mayor put a limit on how much could be spent on this building, and we're paying the price for that now, because it should not have worn out. But in terms of the structure of the building, is it sound?
Yes, yes.
And does it have at least a 25-year useful life left to it?
I think from an infrastructure, it would have by far more than that. It's the structure and those buildings are designed. Look at your existing library; it's 100 years, and the new building would be much more than 25 years in the life cycle. In terms of the infrastructure.
In terms of the steel and the concrete and those sorts of things?
Yeah,
The bones.
The bones.
the bones.
So would you say Alex's numbers might be a little light then, given what you just said, or are they in line with what you were just talking about?
I think they're aligned with. He took the numbers that we got for the HVAC, and then he slid in the renovation numbers. I think the sort of 16 million number is a reasonable starting point for the project. And I think the variables are when you start construction, some of the soft costs that go into it. Right now, what we're seeing on other projects is if with the construction escalation being what it is, the longer you wait, the more expensive the projects get to be as well. So there's that's a part of the wild card. I think the estimate's a good benchmark. I don't know that with the information Alex was assigned to get, we're going to get a better estimate until you really look at it from his drawings are really conceptual. This area is for seating, this area is for collections. We need to turn it into nuts and bolts so that a cost estimator can actually take off those areas and attribute a cost to that.
Okay. His next bullet asks, oh, go ahead, excuse me.
Given that the structure of the building is good, and it obviously needs some work with the air conditioning and mechanical systems, it seems to me the biggest problem with that building is access. We climbed up those stairs. Now, most of the people that have made comment have talked about this atrium, filling it in with floor space and so forth. You could put an elevator, a glass elevator in that atrium and have immediate access to all floors in that building.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's key to reducing the cost of the whole project. Because if you can't get to those floors, no matter what they contain, it's not really worth anything.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good point you make, because the other access issue is the main entry. That seems a lot of discussion in the study was about how the side entry that's handicap accessible doesn't honor the existing historic library, that's the front end of the library. And is there a way to make that front entry accessible on the street and replan the building?
See, I think that's off the point. I think you go in, the best way you can get in there, have access to an elevator that takes you very quickly to the level you want to be at, which contains the
Right.
features that you are looking for.
And you might be able to solve that with an entry on the side of the big stairs, but still on the front of the building.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
leave
that would be
front
the thing to
looking like
look
it
at.
does look.
Mhm.
I mean, one thought I always had was that probably the nicest room in the city is what I'm gonna call the Marble Room, which was the main entrance
Yeah.
in the historic building. And I thought that one of the things we ought to do when we get to the end here tonight is to ask Joel to look at whether there is a way to reestablish that as the main entrance again. Because I think that there's an awful lot to be said for that as the entry to the building. Do you agree, disagree, have any thoughts on that?
I don't know how you make I haven't looked at it yet, but if you could somehow make the front entry accessible and get into that room, the library would function better because it's a bilaterally symmetrical room and organization, and the way you come in now at the side is a little bit disorienting. I think it would be a lot clearer to come into the Marble Room and then emanate from there to the rest of the library. That would be a very clear circulation plan, and I think facilitate the use of the spaces a little bit better. It would be, now, what that does to the lower level, and that I haven't really explored, but I think as a starting point, that would certainly be one benchmark thing to study in this next phase. Can you make that the main entry? It may come out that you can't, but you need to study that.
Ed, did you have a point you wanted to raise?
No, not yet. I'm good.
Okay. So the next point Councilor Kovas had was he wondered where the ratios come from for collection, seating, and staff. What happens when the ratio is out of balance? And I think you're going to tell me that these are historic benchmarks in the library industry?
Well, yeah, that one's a little harder for me to explain because I think Alex spent so much time on that particular topic, but I think what he was getting at is that the ratios aren't necessarily his old historic, they're sort of current historic in that the amount of seating, collaborative, and meeting space in libraries is growing for a number of different reasons, some of which I explained in the opening and why do you need a library? Well, people are using it for different ways. One of the ways I didn't mention is folks that work out of their house or students that are living at home want to go to the library and work, have a quiet place, have a place that you can have a meeting, et cetera. So those needs are evolving, and I think that I don't think it's fair to the report to sort of try to get this answered in a quick analysis, because he went through the two spreadsheets and I think gave a very good response for why he's getting to the ratios he's getting and why he's suggesting that the collection space be downsized just a bit.
Yeah. So Joel, to your point about old data and new data, I had done some research, and the best research I could find on seating per capita dates, all the newest data I could find was back to 1961. Mm-hmm. And in 1961, for 25,000 people, it was 75 seats, and then add 3 seats per 1,000 over that. So if you did that math, I don't know, is that 60 seats to the 75, it's 135 seats. So by 1961 standards, we're fine. which we're far from that. So his point was trying to incorporate the new uses, how libraries are used, and taking that data and coming up with 400 plus or minus seats required, I think was a pretty decent benchmark. And that research was done fairly well. I did, however, disagree with his percentage points, but the 400 seats seemed.
I think you're right on his percentage
Yeah,
points,
but
too.
that's neither here nor there, that's right, yeah. The 400 seats was viable, that's what we asked for, space and use. How is the modern library used? Do we have enough space? Yes, we have enough space. How is it, we have enough square footage? If we agreed on that, right, we have enough square footage. How many seats do we need? We have to figure out how to get 400 seats in there by again, the data that I could find was back to 1961 on 2 3/4 books per person for collection, which may not be the real number, and his data reduced that number greatly, so, again, based on his experience, that's what we paid and asked for, right? So, my point being to that point is that's how we figured out, I forgot Todd's point or question already at this point.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting to hear that. There are very few things that we do today that we thought were appropriate in 1961.
Yeah, right. I mean, we went to the moon 50 years ago this month, right? I mean, and the data I have is even older than that, so I don't know what to tell you, so.
And I guess the last point that Todd asked was, Alex expected that the library would get greater usage if we improved it.
Correct.
And I asked him specifically after. I said, do you have anything to back this up? I said, or is this just, if you build it, they will come? And he indicated that he thought it was the latter. Do you have anything to say on that?
Well, I think it's a question on every public building we work on. You know, towns want to build a senior center, and projections are that a senior center will have a lot more users when you get a new one, and they say, well, how do you prove it? You show other communities, and folks say, well, that's a different community. So it's hard to project a number that's going to be something other than a projection. So I think all Alex was able to do is say, based on libraries in Massachusetts, in New Jersey, in New York, when you renovate them and you make them more of a, he used the term marketplace for what it's worth, which means that it's a space where you can deliver a multitude of services, not just books, but a really robust children's library, a really robust meeting room space that brings community folks into the building that may not just need the library. When you have a robust multi-purpose space that students can come after school, libraries in Milton, Randolph, Lincoln are developing small teen after-school study programs. They're really becoming more focused on serving distinct community needs beyond just the library usage, and I think that that's what leads to increased usage. It's not you build a better library and more people will come to check out books. You build a better library and it's more adapted to today's needs, which go beyond just checking out books, and then those increase your use and activity.
Okay. I think the next thing I'd like to do is hear from the library trustees and the library staff as to what your thoughts are at this point before we talk about where we should go from here. And one of the questions I always have is, Christine, if we expand this and more people start using the library, can you afford to still run the library?
Well, that's a good question. we definitely can still afford to run the library, we just have to run it differently. So when you're looking at how you're gonna allocate floor space and where you're gonna put meeting rooms or where you're gonna put children's space, you do have to consider where staff is going to be, because you're gonna have areas that aren't supervised, which is, I think, why where we are now at that fourth floor, it's kept closed, because there's not enough staff to supervise having folks up and down. So I mean, that would be where your consideration would be for increased costs. Also, increased usage generally means people want more hours. So if we're going to add hours, then we'd have to look at metrics of how many staff need to be in the building to keep the building open. Locally in Massachusetts, a few of the libraries that have done renovations, in particular that teen population, when you create a space for teens, they will come, especially if it's a comfortable space. Libraries are now a destination. It's not an idea of just going in and doing your research. You can do your research, for the most part, on your phone, as long as you're using valid resources. But they're coming to us for the Wi-Fi. They're coming to us for the collaboration space. And the book number that you mentioned is interesting. I haven't really studied the numbers, but if you just look at how publishing has exploded over the last 20 years, I think actually the number of books might actually be higher per capita, just because, I mean, Patterson alone, you could fill up 20 shelves with just that one author. And people are reading. Books really are not dead. I mean, our numbers are up. I think Gail sent some statistical data around of what's happening in the state, and I'm happy to provide some other information. I actually had some of my reference staff look up the best and greatest of what's happening around the world with libraries and what people are doing to build new libraries. So, I mean, libraries are growing. It's a community space. It's not what you might have thought of in the 60s. Families in particular, we managed to eke out some donated furniture and put in the kids' room, put a few more seats in there, and now you have 3 more families that are staying for, a couple of hours, because there's a place for the kids to be and to socialize, and for the parents. We partner with the Literacy Center. We get a lot of folks that come over from there, tutor space, one-on-one meeting space. We have people that need to do Skype interviews, you name it. The need is here in town. Just because we don't have the space now, we're not able to always accommodate them, as you mentioned, even just public meetings. So, I mean, there's definitely a rationale to improve the library beyond just replacing the HVAC system. I did want to bring to your attention, and actually I brought a copy of a press release today about the state money. It was mentioned briefly in the other meeting that the governor was approving another $100 million to go towards state matching grants. However, the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners really wanted $250 million.
$250?
So that's what they had asked for. So the governor gave them $100 million, which is a start in the right direction. $250 million would have cleared the backlog of the 19 libraries that are currently waiting. So at this point, the state is not reopening the grant application process until they can clear out some of those backlogged libraries. If and when the process reopens, from conversations that I had with people in the state construction grant area, they did say that those positions are not static. So if you have a compelling reason and you have a supportive community and you're ready to match that funds, you could jump up the list, or you could even theoretically do some sort of retro reimbursement, but only once the application process is open and an application is on file and you're on the waiting list. So I just want to be clear, that's the latest information. July 2nd was the date of the press release. So
we have a clear dilemma here in
Yeah.
that every winter that the building goes through, it gets worse, and every summer that the building goes through, you need temporary air
right,
conditioning.
temporary chiller is out there right now, pumping away.
And so delay in taking care of the roof and the exterior and the HVAC system has a price associated with it. Not only does the cost go up, but the building deteriorates. So I think we have to really come up over the next few months with a plan as to what we want to do. Are we going to recommend building a new one somewhere else? Are we going to recommend renovating this building? Are we, and if so, is it going to be a major project that we try to get on the state list for? I think those are the options before us. Do you have a preference?
People love the Marble Lobby. I mean, I think that's a compelling reason to renovate the existing building that we have. Then on the other hand, you have parking is an issue. So that's a compelling reason not to renovate the building that we currently have. So, I share your pain. I mean, I could see it working well both ways. As long as if it is renovated, if it's done smart, and hopefully with Joel on board, it will be, so that it's done so that you don't have to think about this again for another 50 years. You don't want to be in the same situation where, you're building to a number and that number's not the right number, and then you're pigeonholed back into a situation where we are now, where the, stuff was already obsolete when it was turned on the first day. So, that would be my only, I could see the library working well either way. And people will come. Wherever we put it, they will come, preferably on public transit would be preferable, because a lot of our folks do use public transit. But, then we have folks that we know. I just did a quick study this week of library card holders, and you look at the South Attleboro population, they go to Seekonk. Nice big parking lot, easy to get in and out. So, those are things to consider. We have a number of people that live in Attleboro, but their main card is at Seekonk. And I'm pretty sure that, that is a situation for them. You have circle around, you can't get parking, you give up and you leave.
Well, just building on that, I know that the redevelopment authority got the transit-oriented district that they're trying to develop. If we were to suggest building a new building rather than renovating this one, of course, there's always the question of what to do with the building that we have, and there's a lot of strong emotions about that. But the other question is that if we built it somewhere along the new Riverfront Drive, that still would be downtown and with public transportation available.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm guessing you're saying that apart from losing the historic building and what reuse would be made,
Sure.
you wouldn't be opposed to something like that?
We want to provide the best library service that we can to the community, and however best, the city feels that that can be done financially responsibly, we're on board. From the library staff. I won't speak for my trustees. Let them have their
Okay.
opinion.
Do we have any questions for Christine? Maybe we ought to hear from the library trustees and the chairman I see sitting right there. I don't know if you have discussed this as a group or not, and whether you're speaking with your sense of the group or with some authority of what the group wants.
Well, I can speak with some authority. I'm Charlie Oliver. I'm the president of the library board. We did discuss it briefly when the idea of this study was first brought forward in January to us. And our decision was that it makes sense to look at all possible alternatives before we as a stakeholder offer our opinion as to what would be best. We think of a renovation as a chance to leapfrog some of the long-term improvements that we wanted to see happen in the library. We were undergoing a study to improve the children's area, and we had started even to raise some funds for an architectural study of that when that was put on hold by a change in the bidding regulations, and came to another halt when the roof started to fall in, as it were. We raised some money to enhance the technology available to patrons within the library, as well as to staff, but primarily to respond to the need that patrons had made known to us that they rely on us for technology. The statement in the gentleman's letter or email to you all about everybody goes to the internet. Not so, or I should say that not everybody has access to the internet. That was made clear in a citywide study that we did 5 years ago, yes? Which was quite extensive, by the way. People need technology. Our technology was not much better, or maybe not even as good as some of us have in our homes. We've managed to enhance our Wi-Fi capabilities, so that's less of an issue than it was 2 or 3 years ago. But still, when we look at the possibility of renovation or new construction, the the possibility of leapfrogging some of these long-term projects which would have cost us years of public or of private fundraising through our friends of the library, I think was very tantalizing. So I guess we at this point we have an open mind. We're all taxpayers, so clearly the cost of the building has that interest as well. Does that answer pretty much what your thoughts are? I think we want to see just as much as you do what the possibilities are, and we look forward to hearing what the architect comes back with for us all. Questions I can answer? Comments I can add from the trustees?
Yeah, I was wondering if any of the other trustees wanted to address this.
Diane Mingerati. The idea of having the choices back when everything started, we started talking about this, the appeal of the new building for me was I envisioned Highland, land, and humongous parking lot where people can come in and find a place to park and not be hassled by anybody giving them tickets, not trying to find, it's hard even to get in these spaces and then to get out of them. So the parking is a real big barrier, I think, to our library, and the fact that we charge people to park there if they don't get the free spaces. The other thing, because I love historical buildings, I went to the Attleboro Library as a high school student. I love going up in the stairs into the beautiful room, but since we put the addition on, I feel when I walk in that there's barriers everywhere. You gotta climb stairs. And I envision with the new building, if we had one, all one floor that is easy for everybody to get around. You don't have to worry about, stairs. And I mean, I had knee surgery, so going up all those stairs before I had it, I'd say, I'm not gonna do that today. And it's hard. I'm sure there's a lot of other people that have the same feeling as I do about that. But I understand the dilemma of the building being where it is, and we want to keep it in the city, in the center, and that's a legitimate argument. But that vision of the new one was very tempting to me. And I know we're in the middle of the high school building, and that's not going to make it easy for us to propose a new library. But those are just my thoughts about the feeling of barriers when we walk into our own library right now, that it isn't easy to negotiate. I mean, you can go up elevators. I'm not a fan of elevators. I always check the date, they were inspected, and make sure that they've been done. I walk if I can. I don't like to take the elevator. But I don't know, it's a big decision we have to make, or you have to make.
Well, but I also want you to understand that we're never going to make a decision, we never have and we never will, in a vacuum. We always want buy-in from the end user. And to me, that's the staff and the trustees, because it's not our job to impose something on you. It's our job to work cooperatively with you. So I want to be clear about that. Everything we've ever done, whether it was a fire station or a water treatment plant or a school, we've always worked hand in hand with the stakeholders. Yeah. And so that's an important principle that, as long as I'm sitting in this chair, will not be deviated from. So.
Good evening, Mr. Jacoby, NBC board members. My name is Kathleen DeSimone. I'm the Vice President of the Board of Trustees. I'm here to echo the comments of the President and Diane, but to give my own personal input. I'm here, as Charlie said, we're all taxpayers. We all live in the city. We're not just library lovers. We're people that care deeply about the city, its population, its buildings, and our community. I want to just give you a little bit of background that this kind of started because we need a roof. Because it was raining on our staff and our patrons and our materials. And that's what we asked for. Put that in the budget. And then it blossomed into this whole idea of, should we get a new library? Should we do extensive repairs? I think I agree with Charlie when he says we want simply what's best for the library and the city. If that's a new building, great. If it's renovating the existing building, that's good too. I'm personally not married to any outcome, only to what's best for the library and the city. I'm a little troubled, in all due respect to Mr. Kobus's questions. I feel that those would have been better directed to Mr. Cohen, who performed the analysis, and in all due respect to Mr. Bergman. But the thing that bothers me most was he questioned the need for a library in today's society. And I cannot begin to enunciate the reasons why libraries are fundamental. But I'll start with and give you one. It's the cornerstone of our democracy. We need democratic spaces now more than ever before. Spaces where people get out of their house and put down their phones and actually rub up against each other and maybe talk to each other and meet each other. It's vital that we keep the libraries open. Their popularity has not diminished. The services that they offer have only increased. And if I had known that that question was on the going to be discussed, I would have prepared a whole lot more to present to you, because that's fundamental. And if that issue needs to be addressed further at other public meetings, I'll be more than happy to present on that one.
Let me be clear.
Yes, sir.
Todd sent this email and he said he wanted some answers, but I think that was, what he told me was that he is firmly committed to having a library.
I get nervous when people start asking,
And-
why do we need libraries, I have to say.
But so I think that the reason he asked the question was that some people in the community, whether we're spending $15 million on renovations or $15 million on a new building, some people in the community will question the need.
Yes.
Just like they question the need for the Council on Aging, for the rec department, for, you name it. I mean, they seem pretty committed to having the potholes fixed and the street lights on and
Right.
having a police and a fire department. But beyond that, there is always debate in a community as to how far government should be going in providing
Understood.
services.
And
so I
moving
think
forward,
he
that
was-
may be something we want to have answers for and have data for. We could come up with some numbers. There's been research done. It's out there, so.
So I think that the reason he asked the question was just so that we would be aware that at some point, if we were standing in this chambers and the city council was sitting around here and we were on that side of the podium proposing a project, that we be prepared to say, yes, there is a need in our community for this, just as there is a need for a rec department and a council on aging.
That's a question for his body to answer, not this body.
Well,
That's a question for the city council to answer, not us.
I
Our job is
agree.
To vet it.
fix the building, new building, what's our recommendation, how much should we spend? I think we're all for the library, and that debate is for Tuesday nights.
I agree with you.
Not this Tuesday night.
I agree with you, but I think that the point that he raised, which is that whenever we get to a public hearing on that, some counselors may have those questions and they have to make the decision, but if we make a presentation that from the library board that says, hey guys, there's a reason for doing this, then I think that's a valid bit of evidence to provide.
Well, let me just
You're
conclude
right,
that.
it's not our decision.
Not our decision to
I'll
put
conclude
that
to
on
say,
us.
as a trustee and as a taxpayer, I'm committed to working with you to do whatever is in the city's best interest in the libraries and the communities, because I think those three interests will merge without any difficulty. So, thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Any other trustees want to speak? Have anything further, Charlie?
Yes, I'd like to add one more point, and that is that as we went to the community looking for funds to produce our technology lab and redesign our children's room, we have over time set aside about $129,000, which certainly can be committed. I think as a board we need to vote on that, but I don't think that's an issue. That money is there. We can't use it at the moment. We had to give some back, actually. So consider that as something that we can contribute to this process as it goes forward.
I'm glad to hear that.
We can't spend our endowment. Most of it, or some of it, is endowed, and otherwise, if we spent the unencumbered portion, the city would have to increase our appropriation every year going forward, so we have enough to pay for materials and meet our minimum requirements for state aid. But other than that, this is something we can do.
Okay. So I think that means that Joel comes back up, because I think the bottom line here is, where do we go from here with the money we have available to us to look at further design work? So you have a suggestion for us? I know we probably all have some suggestions, but do you have a suggestion for us?
Yeah, what I'd like to suggest is that Alex's report is really the programming report and a concept, and that what would fill it out would be a feasibility study, sort of technical term that the state uses, that takes that program, puts it in the plans of the building, creates a scope of work, and then that scope of work can be estimated and a better number put on this, and then allow you to make a better evaluation of, A, does the plan really work, and B, how much does it cost, and have a better certainty about that cost. One of the things I just wanted to come back to is, we gave you a cost to renovate the HVAC system and the roof. And that cost, if you're renovating this building, putting new lights in or changing the HVAC system while the building's open, or without doing all the other work, it's relatively expensive. What will be interesting in this feasibility study is, I think that the cost for the infrastructure work will actually go down, because you're cutting and patching, you're pulling down ceilings and putting them back up. That comes out of the renovation costs that Alex is talking about. So to a certain extent, our HVAC study and his renovation study may have some overlap in the costs that would be good to analyze. Because we literally said, you have an existing building, it's going to stay operational. How do we change the HVAC while doing that? If we do a more major renovation and you close the library and you're changing the ceilings anyway, you don't have to pay for cutting and patching of the plaster and pulling the old ceiling down and putting that ceiling up, because that's coming out of the new construction budget. So I think there's a valid reason to look at that number a little more scientifically.
Well, that raises an interesting point, because back in the early 90s, when we redid the current building, we had a temporary library, which I think was in the art museum, was it?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that we have another space to run a temporary library for, but that would certainly be something we would have to look at, and look at the cost of that. That's the kind of thing that militates in favor of building a new building and then leaving the old building when you move into the new one, right?
That's correct, yeah. Some communities have rented storefronts in downtown and sort of put a mini library in place for the 12 months or 16 months that the renovation goes. So you don't necessarily have to replace the full library for that time.
And there's also the clubhouse at Highland, which might serve that purpose for a limited period of time as well. This feasibility study, what would you estimate the cost of that to be?
Well, I think what I'd suggest is that I work with you and Gail and give you I think that the amount of money that's available, plus I think there's a few dollars that we haven't spent in the Alex Cohen account, we would be able to put together a proposal that gets you a consolidated picture. So with the cost estimate, an outline spec, the drawings, and the narrative, and consolidate this report. And I feel that $27,000 that's remaining is sufficient to do that. I'd outline that, and if that was a direction you wanted to go to, I'd outline that.
We certainly would want to see a proposal and then vet it as a group. Ed?
Yeah. I would love to leave here tonight and give Joel some action items to think about.
Mm-hmm.
And as you prepare your proposal to bring back to us on your conceptual design or getting us to that next level, I would really love you to think about designing a building somewhere around a $425 square foot range, which would be about a $16 million renovation. I would like you to also think about incorporating the state reimbursement. I know the application's closed right now, but projecting what the state reimbursement might be. I would really like you to also take into consideration the operational cost savings of the efficiencies of the new systems going in there over the 20-year period. And here's why. If you were to design this building to $425 a square foot, and I know it's dangerous, someone said we're trying to build to a number, I get it, but I guess we have to start somewhere, right? So, and I agree with that. It's always dangerous to build to a budget and then whatever, I get that. But if we went to that, if we were at $425 a square foot in your head as you were building this proposal back to us, that we would vet, of course, it'd be a $16 million renovation. Assuming that the state reimbursement applications were back open, there could potentially be up to $8 million in reimbursement. So now we're back to that $8 million we have to spend for the caving in roof and deficient systems. That's pretty cool, right? Still a lot of money, still a lot of discussion on the council floor and public meetings and fighting for money and bonding and all that stuff. I get it. Thank God that's not us, right? We may know a few people who will have to have that discussion, but it won't be us. I think that if we could also understand what the savings of efficiencies of the systems are over the 20-year period for the operational cost, that would help show a net cost. The example being, if we had more efficient energy, efficient lighting and more energy efficient heating and air conditioning, our operation costs may reduce $10,000 a month, and then perhaps that'd be $100,000 a year. And over 20 years, that'd be a $2 million savings because of the efficiencies of the systems. Where we could go back to the community, or we would be part of our argument, Kathleen, that you were saying, or being prepared for something that say, yes, it's a $16 million renovation, $8 million returned by the state. It's an $8 million cost to the city. However, it's really a net cost of $6 million. I would love to see, as you design your proposal, kind of take into consideration all of those things. And then Jerry's point, a $2 million building, Jerry, we're only putting $6 million into a $2 million building, not 16. Maybe that would be easier, a smaller bite for, I'm not speaking for him, but that mindset may be better. So as you think about putting that proposal together, I'd like to see Joel think about those things as you put that proposal back to us on what you would design, if that makes sense.
So like a return on investment kind
What a
of.
return on investment would be that third point.
Life cycle cost of the building, I think is what you're
Yeah,
talking about.
life cycle cost of the building, right? Because then we could say it's a net cost to the city of $6 million.
Well, I think those are all valid
Or
points.
whatever the number would be. I'm just throwing a number out, but that's what I would like to see.
Ed, do you have any thoughts at this point?
Well, going back to my original comment about the elevator, that goes along with fixing the building. If the structure is good, you need to fix the air conditioning, you need to fix the roof, you need to add technology, add the infrastructure for technology, and the rest is furniture. If you put an elevator in there and a big open glassed-in elevator that everyone could use and it was efficient and not claustrophobic, I think that would open up the building and the building would become useful at a lot lower number than trying to renovate an old building to something that it isn't.
Jerry?
I think at this point, we gotta, first and foremost, we need to put a roof on that building. That should be addressed and start, heading in that direction, was whether we use that as a library or turn around and sell the building. You're gonna need a roof that's keeping the place waterproof. And that's what the library people are asking for right now is, first and foremost, is a roof to keep the place dry and prevent any further damage.
Absolutely, we don't want the building to deteriorate. The longer we go, not only will inflation drive the cost up, but damage will drive
Right.
the cost up.
That's my point.
So, okay, Derek?
I would like to add to Ed's comments, such as if you could do the pros and cons of new versus renovating, such as the parking, the elevator. So put pros and cons on both sides, whether you do new or you do existing, renovating the existing. And I do have a question regarding the state funding. Is there requirements or restrictions on that
Is there a requirement?
with the state funding? Is there certain things, earmarks that we have to meet, or?
Well, you have to get your plan approved by the Board of Library Commissioners.
Joel, I think what she's asking,
Is there
if I
any-
can just jump in,
Yeah.
is that the MSBA requires us to have classrooms of certain sizes.
Right, thank you, Jack. Specifics, building
The
specifics.
auditorium couldn't be larger than a certain size, the
It's not
gym
the
had to be
same.
a certain size. They have strict controls that you have to fit your project
Yeah.
into. Does the library process incorporate
It's
that?
not that strict, no.
Okay, thank you.
Mostly just ADA. I mean, that's their biggest.
That's their only,
That's their biggest thing.
That's the
Okay,
federal law
thank
anyway,
you.
it's not a choice.
thank you.
Jackie?
Just thinking of the parking, the standard argument all the way around, and I think Diane mentioned it earlier, is if we build there at that, if we fix that building up as it is there anything we can do related to the parking? I know it's a municipal lot next door, so it's not the library's lot, there's only a few spaces, but they're redoing the parking garage now. How far would parking be? What could we do for parking?
Okay.
And I guess from my point of view, and I think this is just cumulative, I would like the feasibility study to compare sort of a down and dirty new building with some options, more than
Yes.
one option for renovating this building, so that we have 4 or 5 or 6 different things that we can look at and see
think
what
that
we
was our-
like and what fits our needs.
I think that's what our expectations were of the space and use study, and it didn't really get fulfilled, right?
Well, yeah, I think that was a part of it, and I think I think what we found out, which, you know, may have been obvious to some of the people in the audience, but not maybe to us, was the fact that, you know, what's on the first floor maybe should be on the 4th floor, and what's on the 4th floor maybe should be on the 1st floor, those sorts of things, and it was very useful to find that out.
I thought that was articulated very well.
But I think we need to say, okay, if you built a new building of X number of square feet, what would the cost likely be? If we were to renovate this building, option A, B, C, D, whatever, you know, dream, look at things like Ed's talking about, look at things like reopening the front door. What do all those things mean, and how can we, and what kind of preliminary costs will we put on it? I think that's what this group is looking for going forward.
Okay.
And so we'd need a proposal from you. Obviously, we'd have to take it to the mayor to make sure we're okay, and we might have to go back before the municipal council, depending on what the auditor says as to whether we can do that within the scope of the bond that we were already given. And I think the other thing is the point that Jerry brought up, which is that we might need to do something like, for instance, with the roof sooner rather than later. And so we certainly want to coordinate that with whatever we decided to do. And
That's what all started, right, Jack? We had $8 million price tag, and it's like, we're gonna throw $8 million into this 2,740,000
Yeah,
mile car, right? And is there a better way for us to do it? And that's what got us to this point.
yeah. And I think it's a process, and you don't make these decisions quickly. And I think we've taken our time getting to this point, but I think there is some urgency to figuring out when the snow starts flying in December,
Right.
you know, what's the status of our building gonna be? So does that give you some ideas as to how to put a proposal together?
Yes.
Okay. Anything from the audience further? Counselor?
Can I talk from here?
Sure.
Well,
As long as-
if he's taping it, then,
Actually, you might need to come up
The
here
mic.
because this is it's gonna be on YouTube soon.
The only thing I haven't heard about is the status of the windows. And
Status of what?
The status of the windows.
Windows are leaking.
Yeah, especially in the children's area, that's my understanding. So I would hope that including with the roof, we look at the windows, the ones that are leaking the most.
There are certainly some repairs that are necessary to avoid further deterioration of the
Yeah.
building. And so I think, and Joel has a handle on all of that from what we
Sure.
did the first time around.
That was my only comment.
It's a point well taken.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, then, I think the last thing for us left to do is to confirm the payment of $17,000 to BH&A.
so moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I think we are adjourned
Oh,
at,
Jack, sorry, there's one more vote, the latest bill from BHSA needs to be approved. The last item on the agenda.
oh, there's another bill for $31,000. That's the last item on the agenda? Okay. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So now are we adjourned at a couple minutes before 7? Let's check it. Check Verizon's time. 6:56 according to this.
Thank you, Jack.
Jack, when's the next school?